Did you run a 5-round combat, but it felt like 15? Were your players on their phones, not paying attention to when it was their turn? Was the monster you put against the party a single monster against all the party? Worse yet, was that monster just a high AC and a ton of hit points? These are common issues people have with combat in D&D. It's one of the biggest complaints of why people like other systems better. D&D is a combat-based system, but combat's a drag, let's be honest. It really is. It can take 4 hours for one session. So, there are some tips and tricks though. Hi, I'm Rich, the First Time DM. Let's talk about the tips and tricks you can use to make your combats better. First, let's talk about your players. The easiest thing you can do is make sure the players know when it's their turn. Matt Mercer does this amazingly well in Critical Role. It's one of the things I love that he does. He will say, Taliesin, you're up. Laura, you're on deck. So that that person always know that their turn's next. So they need to get ready. They may not have been paying attention to the round, especially if it takes 15, 20 minutes to get back to them. But once you tell them that it's their turn next after this person, that should get them going and hopefully have them make their turn right away. Second thing you can do for the players, have them roll their damage dice when they roll their dice to hit. This way, if they hit, the damage dice is done. They can always add additional dice later, say if the paladin wants to smite or there's charges in a weapon they can use. But at least have them roll their dice, their weapon damage at the same time as they're to hit. Little seconds here and there is what takes a 2-hour combat down to an hour and a half combat, because it all adds up. Next, let's focus on initiative. Couple ways to do initiative. One, always have it shown, if you can. If you're not using what I just talked about, where you're telling players when their turn is, at least have something displaying so the players know. This will speed things up. Also, you as the DM, if you know an encounter is going to happen, roll the initiative for the monsters ahead of time. This is what I do usually, unless a random encounter or I'm not sure if they're going to get to an encounter that night. But I always roll the initiative ahead of time for the monsters. They already have their set stats, so I can easily roll it, put them into the little initiative blocks I use on their stat sheets for tracking the fight. So it saves just a little bit of time. That way I can immediately ask the players what their initiatives are. I'm not having to wait. You can have all the players go at once and then all the creatures go. You could roll a d6, and if it's evens, the creatures go first this round, odds, whatever. You can do it that way. It takes more practice as a DM. It's simpler. It could lead to a lot of one-shots happening if the players are always going first. It can also lead to a player's death if, say, the BBG's going first without having that, by default. So be careful with that, but it can speed up the process because now you're not worrying about initiative. It's the players all go first. They decide left to right around the table. That's how initiative is. Could be. Or it's always in the same order based upon decks. There are many different things you can do. Leave it up to you and what works for your table, which is key. Speeding up combat, making better combat, running combat more efficiently is up to you and what works for you as the DM and for your players. Now, speaking as you as the DM, it really comes down to how you run your monsters, how you run your creatures. Yeah, it can be tough, especially if you have 3 or 4 different types on the board, because now they're all going to different initiatives. One of the fastest ways to do is take average damage every time. Yes, rolling Meteor Swarm damage dice all at once is great. It looks amazing, but probably using a dice roller. But use the damage, the average damage that is in every stat block. If it says 1d6 plus 4, it's either going to be a 7 or an 8 for average damage, because 1d6, the average is 3.5. So if you do 3.5 plus 4, you get 7.5. So up to you whether you want to go up or down. This really helps. It speeds up combat. You're not rolling a lot of dice. You're rolling to hit, and that's it. You can mix and match too. For goblins, take the average damage, but for the big, fire breath from the Ancient Red Dragon, roll the dice if you're going to do it once or twice in a session, you know. So mix and max it, but it will speed your combat up and make it more efficiently. It's a lot less math for you too. It's a lot less work. When it comes to monsters' abilities, I like to print out the stat sheets and highlight their key abilities, immunities, resistances, their to hits, any special things with the to hits, like saves. I highlight all these so I can quickly reference them, so I'm not fumbling around. Still a work in progress for me. Combat's still a little sluggish for me, but it does help. Also, keep track of your legendary actions and resistances per round. Keep track of breath weapons. I will write down round 1 used, charged. Round 2 used, charged, and cross them off depending on as appropriate, so I know whether I can use it that round or not. It's bookkeeping, but it will help speed up the game if you're already ahead of the game for how you want to track things. Highlighting the stat blocks really saves time as well, because you can highlight their saves, you can highlight their immunities, and you can respond right away if it's appropriate when a player hits you or has you have to make a save. First, before we get into monsters, let's talk about our sponsor today, Only Crits. Only Crits only has a couple hours, a few hours, like 20 hours, 40 hours, something like that, left in their Kickstarter for their Fuck Me Dice 2.0. I'm a backer. There's only a couple of colors left to unlock and one more text saying. So head on over to the link that was in the description. But for now, let's talk about Only Crits. Take it away, Advertising Rich. This video is brought to you by Only Crits. Do you love sharp-edged dice? What about dice with things inside of them like dots? What about metal dice, both solid and hollow? How about mystery bags of dice? I know I can't resist those mystery bags of dice at my friendly local game store. I just always have to buy one when I pop in. What about dice trays and dice cases? Well, Only Crits has you dice goblins and dice dragons taken care of. They have everything you can ever want when it comes to dice, and each one of us can always use more dice in our lives. So, click the link in the description to go to Only Crits, let them know the Laughing Tavern sent you, and enter the code MIZOCRITS at checkout for 10% off your order. Thanks to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Thank you, Advertising Rich. Also, this topic was suggested by friend of the channel on BlueSky, Wobble Rocket. Go check out Wobble Rocket stuff. Links in the description. He's an amazing guy. Just rescued a kitten named Pixel. Does a lot of live streaming of old school video games and is even turning D&D dungeons into Minecraft buildings. Go check him out. Links below. Thank you, Wobble Rocket. So, one of the biggest things you can do as a DM is when it comes to the monsters. First thing to consider is always action economy. Action economy is the number of attacks or turns that the monsters, all the monsters take in one round versus what the players can do. If the players can take 5 actions, but your monster can take 1, those players are going to wipe the floor with that monster. See, once I said wipe the floor with that monster, dragon dropped. See, it doesn't take much to drop a dragon, I guess. And he just doesn't want to stay there. All right, so he'll just sit down here. So, you want to have it closer to balance. This is where legendary actions come into play. If you're throwing a solitary monster against a party, legendary actions will increase the number of actions to make it more even, 5 versus 5 per se. But this also means you are now rolling more dice, you are making more attacks, the players are having to make more saves, so that just adds to how long it takes for combat. Legendary actions are great, but they can increase a combat. So you want to do it when you want to have a combat go 3 to 5 rounds, not end in 1. Also, in regards to monsters, especially the solitary monsters, don't just bump their HP and bump their AC. All it's going to do is drag the fight on and on and on. If they're harder to hit and they have more HP to be hit for, especially when you're talking normal condition resistances and immunities and damage resistances, that monster is going to take a long time to drop. So be mindful of that. What you can do for a solitary monster is up how much damage it can do. If it does a D6, make it a D8. If it takes multi-attack for 2 D6s, 1 for each, make it 1 attack if action economy works for 1d12. Roughly, the average is roughly the same. A 1d12 is 6.5, 2d6s is a 7. So the average damage is right there. So it's still going to be doing roughly the same amount of damage for the 2 attacks, but it's just going to take 1 attack, which means you go faster. You can also make it 2d8 for 1 attack if you want to really hit it hard. Waves are a way to make combat better, but waves also bring in more creatures to the map, which is fine. You can still run an efficient, fast combat with waves, provided the waves are minions. 1 hit and they drop. It doesn't matter what type of damage the player does. They drop in 1 hit. And make these random. And have the number that is brought in random as well. 1d4, 1d6 at the starts of rounds 2, 3, 5, and 6. How you would roll to bring in a wave. Players are always looking for waves. It adds additional layers of complexity to the battle. It can be run better, but you have to make them minions. If you don't, now you're just adding more things that are to the map. And let's be honest, the players do that enough with summonings and all that. So you want to balance out how many creatures you are running yourself, because it's going to slow you down. If you're like me and I have 3 or 4 different stat blocks I'm having to flip back and forth between. Always have your creatures of the same type run at the same initiative count. Always. If you have 5 goblins, they all go on turn 16. You don't break up Goblin 1 goes, Goblin 2. No. Goblin 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all go at the same time. Makes it much better. It just makes your life easier, because then you're looking at 1 stat block for that round of attacks. Basically, you've got to do what works for you, and you will learn to do combat better as you sit behind the screen more. Like with everything else, it takes time. I am still learning, and I still forget things on stat blocks, even though they're highlighted. I still forget turn orders, even though I have them written down. I still forget what players going next. I skip players. I forget that their familiar didn't go. I have one rule. All familiars, all summons, any creatures like that go on the player's turn. They can go before or after, but it's on the player's turn. Speeds things up, that way you're not tracking a familiar later on in the round. It makes it much easier. And it allows for some cool combos to happen immediately, rather than waiting for the Warlock to put Dragon's Breath on their familiar, and then they have to wait 5 turns for it to actually fly over and do it. It happens at the same time. Just works better. Descriptions. Your combat descriptions. Do them. Don't just say, does a 20 hit? You take 3 points of damage. Describe it. The troll reaches up and pounds on top of your player's head, and you take 4 points of damage. Do it, but don't be like Robert Jordan and describing the mountain that you see for 3 pages, okay? Short, sweet, but thematic. You will get better at this. I suck at these. I'm still working on it. I'm better at the written form and reading than I am having to improvise stuff when it comes to combat damage and doing stuff like that in the fight. Don't ramble. As you can see, I'm a professional rambler. Rambling causes combat to go on as well. Each word adds time. Each dice roll adds time. Everything you do during combat adds time to the combat. The other night, last week, my party is level 13. We ran 1 combat that took 3 hours, and it was 4 rounds. Now, this wasn't because of anything I was doing wrong or what the players were doing. I created an encounter that used a lot of wild magic surges, and it was just adding time to the battle. And fog cloud came in. Everybody's at disadvantage, so now it's taking longer too. So unexpected things will happen during your game, which will cause the times to extend out. It really comes down to spending more time and figuring out shortcuts that don't take away from the game experience, just take away from how long it takes to do something. Find what works for you. It really comes down to that. You know, if your players are talking too much during combat, strategizing, I have a rule at my table that if it starts to be too much, I will give them 1 minute between rounds to strategize for that coming round. And they are not allowed to strategize during it. I bust out a little 1 minute timer, a little hourglass. They have a minute. They plan it all out. That does speed up combat. Because remember, while your players are trying to figure out how to work with each other's abilities, skills, items, the actual PCs would know all this. They would know that, hey, if you cast, I forgot what it's called now. Wow, it's plant growth or spike growth. If you cast plant growth, I can use my mace and push them through it and add some more damage. So let's do that next round. It works better when it's in between rounds and it's timed. And I got this idea from one of the DMs I play for in Virginia. Thank you, Dave, if you're listening. That's a great thing because, let's be honest, players will talk, players will communicate, players will metagame, players will talk above the table every chance they get. Well, they want to play the game right. They want to do cool things. And it's hard when their character would already know all that, but your players themselves don't. So you've got to give them a chance to do it. All that talking springs time out too. So if you can time box that so that they only have a set time to discuss the upcoming strategy, you will notice drastic improvements in your combat. Drastic. And I may have to start implementing this rule back at my table because I use it here and there based upon the players themselves. But the higher level you get, the more complicated and intricate the battlefield becomes. So those time boxes for strategizing really come into play. If you need to, give them 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Use your best judgment, especially at bigger tables. You're going to need more time. But 4 to 5 players, a minute should be enough to quickly go through it. And generally, I don't hold them to the minute. If they're actually talking and planning something out, I give them a little bit more time. Because to me, the time in between the rounds is better while people are waiting on their turn. But combat. It's the worst part of D&D. It's the funnest part of D&D, but it's the worst part of D&D. It's what your characters were built to do. You build your characters for combat most of the time, but nobody wants to wait 30 minutes in between the times they're actually able to do stuff. One last note. Be very careful with spells and items that take players out. Stun. I had a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey effect that took a player out of a round for a second while they were reliving a memory. So they were gone for 1 round. It was kind of like stun. But be very careful in using this because this will also make players lose focus so that when they come back in, it's been 40 minutes and they've got to figure out what they want to do. So be very careful using things like that take the players out of a round because it will slow you down in the long run. But combat. What are some tips and tricks you've done to make your combats better? There's a lot of them out there. I just going off of my experience here. So leave comments below what you guys do. Still shooting for 500 subscribers. I turned 50 later this week. Subscribe to the channel. Help me get there. We're a couple hundred away, so it's going to be rough. Also, check out my BlueSky. I am giving away 5 copies of my Leia the Long-Lasting PDF in honor of my 50th this week. I'm going to give 5 copies away to people on BlueSky. You have to follow me on BlueSky. You have to love my post and repost the post about the giveaway. So, it's on the channel's BlueSky, the Laughing Tavern BlueSky. Link will be in the description. So, as always, love each other, be nice to each other, and just accept each other. Have a nice day.